Wednesday on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. And a terrific show today. Jeff Day from the Star Tribune, formerly of the sports section, now on the news side, but had the story of the week, both in terms of my intrigue and in terms of everybody else's intrigue, based on readership numbers, comments, things like that, about this huge garage house out on Lake Minnetonka and the battle for, whether it's okay to build it or not. Chad Greenway, former Vikings linebacker, part of a lawsuit, all sorts of intrigue and stuff like that with it. So Jeff and I will talk about that story, and it's probably its resolution, hopefully, now that the courts have ruled on whether this garage Mahal can still remain standing. Jeff and I will talk Timberwolves also, just because Jeff and I can't get on the show and not talk about the Timberwolves. A Gophers football injury now to go with the Vikings injury and the Twins injuries. We'll get to that at the end of the show. A couple more thoughts on J.J. McCarthy in a little bit here. We talked a lot about J.J. McCarthy on an Access Vikings podcast yesterday. Went live yesterday afternoon, so check that out. A lot of thoughts from myself, Ben Gessling, Andrew Kramer about the severity of the injury, where we go from here, stuff like that. So you want to check that out on the Access Vikings podcast. First, though, what I miss, Twins. 13-3 win over Kansas City. Second win of the series. 4-2 on this important homestand now. Obviously, a lot of heroes, especially at the plate, in a 13-3 win. Max Kepler had a big game, the middle of the order. Jose Miranda, Matt Wallner, they were in the middle of a lot of rallies. Christian Vasquez been hitting great lately after a poor start to his season. Sounds like a trip to Driveline maybe a month or so ago helped him turn his season around. The big story, though, was the debut of Zebby Matthews, starting pitcher who has made a meteoric rise from Class A at the start of this year to the majors now, jumping 3 levels along the way. Went to Double-A, then Triple-A, then here. He didn't skip any levels, but he just keeps getting promoted. Strike thrower, good stuff. Lots to like about him. Funny, people on Twitter. I've seen a few people on X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days. I still call it Twitter. I hate calling it X. I don't care. The platform is not what it used to be, but it's still a useful place. It still can be a fun place from time to time. Saw a few Twins fans suggesting that Zebby Matthews, great name, we should call him Zebby Calvin Nuke Lelouch after the fictional character in Bull Durham, one of my favorite sports movies, baseball movies of all time, probably my favorite sports movie of all time. Zebby, it was Ebby Calvin. Nuke Lelouch was the main character. Ironically enough, he was more of a wild thing, threw a lot of pitches out of the zone, hitting batters until veteran grizzled catcher Crash Davis, played by Kevin Costner. Nuke Lelouch played, of course, by Tim Robbins. Before he helped rein him in and get him straightened out. It's a baseball story. It's a love story. Anyway, you guys have all probably seen Bull Durham, and if you haven't, go watch it right this minute once this podcast is over. So he's the opposite of the fictional pitcher, but he does have this interesting, amazing name, Zebby Matthews. Full name is Daniel Zebulon Matthews, which is almost even better, but Zebby Matthews, terrific name and a terrific start. 5 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, no walks, 5 strikeouts. Very solid, right? Gets through the Royals order a couple times, gets Bobby Witt in a couple of key situations, things like that. He's been one of the American League's best hitters all year, hottest hitter of late. Gets him out in some key spots, gets the Twins to, gets them to the 6th inning with a big lead, and they kind of cruise from there. The larger point I want to make, though, is the Derek Falvey pitching pipeline, has that arrived? And if it has, it's gotten there in interesting fashion. Remember, Falvey and Thad Levine came here in 2016, after the 2016 season, before the 2017 season. 2016 was the disaster, total system failure year. They lost over 100 games. Everything seemed like a lost cause. Those guys arrived, turned things around to a large degree. They made the wild card in 2017, started a string of better play, by and large for the entirety of their tenure. Some dips in 21 and 22, but back to the division winners in 23 and contending at least for a playoff spot this year. Still 3.5 behind Cleveland at this point, putting some distance between themselves and the Royals in the wild card chase with this series right now. Pitching pipeline, though. Look at everybody who's in the rotation right now because of injuries, things of that nature, and because of who they're counting on right now. And look at where and when they were drafted. You get Zebby Matthews, 8th round pick by the Twins and the Falvey regime in 2022. Obviously, he's the most recent to arrive, drafted just 2 years ago in the 8th round. You had David Festa, who's been doing good work in the rotation, another rookie, 13th round pick in 2021. Louie Varland, who is expected to make another start tonight. We can't quite call him a smashing success story yet. He started the year in the rotation, struggled, went back to St. Paul, but he's definitely done some praiseworthy things, especially in the bullpen last year, and is now getting another chance in the rotation. 15th round pick in 2019. Bailey Ober, if we go all the way back to their first draft, the first Falvey Levine draft in 2017, a 12th round pick in 2017, the first draft they presided over. So a lot of kind of mid to late round picks, not these like blue chippers first rounders for pitching. And they seem to have a strategy, right? Draft guys in the middle to late rounds, maybe from slightly undervalued colleges, help them add pitches, help them add velocity. Zebby Matthews has added a bunch of velocity, and that's helped him get to the majors so quickly. Kind of give him these designer pitches, this additional velocity, and just kind of keep throwing these guys out there and see which ones can rise to the top. And right now they've got a whole bunch of them rising to the top because you get, obviously Joe Ryan injured right now, and he's, obviously came over in a trade, a 7th round pick in 2018, but they can probably take some credit for his continued development as well. He's injured right now. Chris Paddock injured right now. So, the two rotation mainstays right now who they started the year with, Bailey Ober and Pablo Lopez, but you've got, Paddock hurt right now. You were hoping for DeSclafani at the start of the year, but he was hurt. You had Varland in the rotation at the start of the year, but he got knocked around, so then they called up Simeon Woods-Richardson. Woods-Richardson, again, a trade in the Jose Barrios trade. He was a 2nd round pick back in the day, so he had a little bit of a higher pedigree and was already a pretty highly regarded prospect when he came over. But if you look at who they've got in the rotation right now, it is a lot of guys who are very young and who they have developed lately. And that is the key to surviving, especially on a mid-tier payroll when you're not going to be able to add at the trade deadline, when you're not going to be able to sign your own free agents like Sonny Gray to, $25 million contracts. You've got to have ready replacements. I was skeptical that the Twins did. I'm still wondering how well all of these guys will hold up. But for right now, all of these guys look like they're capable at least of holding up their end of the bargain, and that could keep the Twins in the race into the end of the season. And if we've been critical of Derek Falvey for the regime not developing the pitching that we thought it would, given his reputation coming here in 2017, we need to give him some credit right now, especially if these guys keep pitching the way they have been pitching so far this season. Now, like I said at the jump, talked a lot of J.J. McCarthy on the Access Vikings podcast that we recorded yesterday. I'd say 75% of that show was about McCarthy, his injury, torn meniscus revealed on Tuesday. We learned Monday he had knee soreness, not what you wanted to hear. Now, there's still, with the meniscus, as we've talked about, on the show on Access Vikings, and we've written about in the last day, you have a meniscus, there's options. We won't know the severity until they get in there to do the surgery, which is expected to be this week. We won't know exactly what they're looking at. If he just needs a trim, very good chance he would be back at some point this season, maybe not even too deep into the season. Karl Anthony Towns had a meniscus repair during the Wolves season. I think the surgery was March 12th. He was back April 12th. So if you're looking for a silver lining, it can be a relatively short-term injury if it's not as serious. The problem is the full repair is deemed the better kind of long-term health solution. So if they get in there and they're like, it's bad enough that we need to do the full repair on this thing, probably talking about him being out for the rest of the season. So that's a pretty big kind of range that we won't know about for a little while. What this injury means in the short term is two things. One, it is taking away some of the joy of this season, this potential joy of the Viking season, because even if J.J. McCarthy wasn't playing, which he wasn't going to be playing at the start of the year, as far as we know, he wasn't going to be the starter. Sam Darnold was always going to be the week one starter, the veteran they brought in. But there was always going to be this kind of in the back of your mind, hey, if Darnold struggles, hey, if McCarthy looks good, which of course he did in that first preseason game, giving us that little glimpse right before we learned of his injury, there was always going to be this kind of like, oh, here's the exciting thing that's coming in the future. And that's still coming. But if Darnold struggles in the first 2 weeks of the season and McCarthy is out, there's not going to be this clamor to play McCarthy. There's not going to be that option right now. There's not going to be kind of this, this kind of desire, this wish, kind of bring the rookie in, because he can't if he's hurt. So that part of it we've been deprived of, at least for now, at least until we know more about how they are going to treat this injury. Second thing it does is it puts a lot of the onus back on Darnold. If he's been kind of the forgotten man in JJ mania, especially lately after he's been getting a little bit more, spotlight in practice, and of course, highlighted in that preseason game with those 2 touchdown passes. Now the focus is back on Darnold, who had a good series in his one series in that preseason game, playing against the Raiders. First team defense, by the way, led the Vikings down the field, could have had a touchdown if things had gone a little bit differently in the red zone. They don't score points, but they get all the way down to like the 2. So, a good drive, and, something where you look at it and you say, okay, he looks like he fits this offense pretty well, that if they're going to have any chance at success, he's got to be good. And that was always kind of true, but now it becomes even more true. This doesn't really change necessarily the Vikings' arc for this season in terms of what their ceiling is. It changes the fun level. It changes kind of what might allow you to be imaginative as you watch these games if McCarthy's out. But it definitely puts the onus back on Sam Darnold. If the Vikings are going to have a successful season, it's got to be Darnold, it's got to be the defense, and it's got to be the run game. A little bit of a different formula than we've seen in the past, but that is what they are dealing with right now, especially if this proves to be the more serious type of meniscus injury. I was worried, Jeff Day, that I wouldn't have a chance to talk to you as much. You have moved from the sports department to the news department of the Star Tribune, out of the toys into the real life. But then, Jeff, not long after you made the switch, you latched on to this story about this garage, this giant home in the West Metro. Former Viking Chad Greenway is part of a lawsuit that just finally got settled, at least this round, got settled this week. So no better time to have you back on Daily Delivery to talk about that, and maybe some Timberwolves, let's be honest, too. Jeff, how are you?
Well, good. And I don't say from the toys to the real world or whatever you said. I say from the courts to the courts. That's how I do it. I believe that all of this is, we're one big company here. But yes, this story, is, I don't know what you relate it to. I guess it's similar to, some kind of major transaction in sports where it's just catnip for readers. And
yes, it is.
The story had a lot of elements, and we had reported it. John Ryan had reported on it a number of years ago when it first kind of came to light, and then it reached a resolution, and so it came across my desk. And it certainly, I think I don't know what to say about it other than I think it has all of the elements that kind of drive fascination amongst the general public. Very notable people, not just Chad Greenway and his wife, but the other plaintiff is a United Health Group major executive. You've got then the Redmonds are the people who are building this home in this garage. Those are very notable families in Minnesota, and it's a big house on Lake Minnetonka. I mean, anybody from the metro, we all know what we're talking about here. So yeah, it's definitely been a story that I think has kind of naturally been something that readers are interested in.
And the crux of it is basically that two people on either side of this big house that's being constructed have an issue with the size of the house and especially with the size of the garage, right? And so this construction's going on, and then they're worried about how big it is, or am I mischaracterizing it?
I don't think you're mischaracterizing. I think there's an element of somewhere in the process of this, at least according to the court documents and the testimony that you can read about from everybody involved, everything was going well. There was a lot of coordination, communication between the neighbors about the process, because this kind of construction, I mean, that's going to overwhelm, the people on either side of you. You need to have kind of a buy-in from everybody involved. And there seemed to be that. And I don't think I'm mischaracterizing anything when I say that when the garage started getting involved, this 1,600 square foot garage, 1,600 square feet is a big number for a garage.
Bigger than my previous house. And you called it the Garage Mahal.
I didn't call it the garage.
The headline called it. Sorry, that was the headline.
Yeah, it's what the neighbor, and I don't write headlines anymore.
No, that's true.
So stop judging my character.
You called Jeff Day called it. No, I'm just kidding. The story. It's been labeled because of the testimony. Yes.
Yes, the Garage Mahal, which is one of the great names. That somehow I think kind of created this element of has something been done kind of out of city ordinance or out of they also started talking about environmental regulations. And in general, the findings of the court were that now it's technically an LLC, but it's the Redmonds, that they had acted within city ordinance, that they had followed all rules, and then they had some testimony from environmental experts that ruled that their house did not violate any environmental regulations, especially this thing that, and again, this is how newspaper life is. You learn about stuff you have never heard about in your entire life. This idea of bluff impact or setback zones. And basically we're talking about...
I'm big into bluff impact or setback zones. I always have been.
Yeah, we impact, we set back. So it's about drainage, I think, more or less, the idea of water drainage, and you're dealing with a shoreline. And so this stuff does matter to people. And anybody who has ever lived on a lake with neighbors, I think this is not uncommon to have questions about what people are doing to shorelines. And certain, municipalities have different rules regarding all of this. But this case, over time, started to take on an air of, at least it reads this way, that there was kind of a disconnection that happened between all the parties involved. And all of a sudden, we're talking about lawsuits, and we're asking questions about whether the house was built within kind of proper code and all of these sort of things. Eventually, the judge rules that, everything seems to be done above board here. And I think what's interesting about this to me, just as a human being, is as I understand it, they're all still neighbors. And that's the real dream to me. I mean, I think that's the thing where, the attorney that represented the Ellerts and the Greenways kind of alluded to this. He's like, when you reach this level of status in society, you're not unfamiliar with lawsuits, which maybe is a sad state of affairs on what happens in society when you make a bunch of money. But, and I have no idea if Chad Greenway's ever been through anything like this in his life. But I think there's a part of this where it's like maybe no hard feelings or maybe a lot of hard feelings, but everybody just kind of, you have your home, and I think it gets personal quickly. But in this instance, it was ruled that the Redmonds had done things in accordance with laws and environmental regulations.
And you alluded to it. I don't think I will ever have the amount of money where I could affect something like that or take something like this to court, nor can I imagine caring this much about it to take it to court. These are my words, not yours. But
right.
It is fascinating to see kind of the what comes up in a lawsuit, what gets taken to court, and like you said, that they could maybe remain on good, cordial, neighborly terms. I don't know what the block parties are like there. I don't know what, the national night out is like. The national night out, I don't know what that's like in that neighborhood or on that block. We just had that not too long ago, but it's a fascinating story, and it sounds like it might not be done. They have a chance to appeal if they want to, right?
Well, you never know with that kind of stuff. I mean, I think it's, again, the plaintiff's attorney was essentially saying that they felt that there were real environmental concerns with this. Whether you believe that or not, I think is entirely up to probably the perspective you take. Again, stemming from this thing of they had plenty of time to raise environmental concerns. They acknowledged that. The Greenways acknowledged that they were aware that there had been, public hearings about the construction, that there had been a city council vote about the construction, that years had gone on in the course. And this was, of course, the argument that the defense attorney was claiming, the person representing the Redmonds, that this house had been being built for 2.5 years when legal maneuvers started. He's like, so there's no way that you can say that you were unaware of what was happening there. But I do think, you say that you can't envision it. When I moved into my home, this is going to sound absolutely ludicrous, but there's this little planter area near the sidewalk on the edge of my property line. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I was out there looking, there were some flowers, like some rose bushes or something like that. And This woman comes outside and she goes, "That's mine." And I said, "What's yours?" And she goes, "Yeah, I know that looks like that's in your yard, but that's my little garden area." And I thought, I have a problem here. I have a problem on my hands. I have a neighbor who's very controlling about her space, right? And I remember telling my wife, I was like, I think we've got maybe an issue here. And that woman and I are now almost best friends. She's like one of my favorite people on earth. But I do think neighbors, especially neighbors when they move in, you know what I mean? They come into your space and you have the way that you like to do things. I think we're all at least familiar with that concept. And, there's this quote in the story about, Jenny Greenway, Chad Greenway's wife, seeing this garage door and becoming, kind of viscerally upset. And we all might take kind of whatever you feel about that. But I also will say, like, your home is a very personal place. And I don't think it's uncommon. I think what we're seeing here, so what I'm saying is I don't think it's uncommon for that space to become personal and to become maybe testy. But to see it play out in 3 years in court and to sort of see what we're talking about, I think we all kind of look at that and say, oh, well, the lifestyles of the rich and famous look at these problems that nobody else deals with. But that is diminishing, in my opinion, as, an empathetic human being, high and low, that, personal matters are personal matters. And if you have the resources and you want to take up the court's time, that's what we're all here for. Everybody has their right to do that. So, yeah.
If it pleases the court. But yeah, I get it. We just moved into a new house a couple months ago, and I have no idea. Like, we've obviously talked to a whole lot of our neighbors, but we take our kids and dog on a walk, like almost nightly at like 9:30, and like everybody else is probably asleep. Like, we've got 3 fairly small kids, but it's summertime. They're all kind of late. Like, I have no idea what they think of us, like walking through the neighborhood, shining our lights, looking for frogs. Like, I wonder if they just think we are absolutely bonkers. And they're like, who are these people that just moved into our neighborhood and go on these frog walks every night? I don't know what they think.
Well, I had a guy in my neighborhood.
They can't sue us, though. They can't sue us for that.
No, well, I was walking my dog off leash, which, okay, this is against stuff, but my dog is very respectable and doesn't bother anybody and walks close to me. And he said to me, that's against city ordinances. And I wanted to say thank you for keeping me up to date. I'd like, all city ordinances or just this one specific one? What all are we getting in? So, yeah, there's always that thing of, who are you bothering? Are you parking too close to a driveway?
Yes.
Is it weird to be walking and looking for frogs with flashlights? I personally think you're in good space there. I think that's a healthy thing to do.
It's a healthy thing. But I do too.
I'll also say this, and this is the truth of the matter for you and me. It's amazing what attracts reader interest. You know what I mean? It's like you kind of know. I'll never cease being fascinated by things. Like, I look at this and it's like, this to me is fun and kind of loose. And yet it's probably the thing without question that I've heard the most about since I started this new job. It's not even close. There's no comparison. So
the traffic on it was huge. It gets like a second and third life from social media and getting passed around. But you get the Vikings into it. Chad Greenway hasn't played with them for a while, but anytime you can get
I think it's
famous people that
even as
cross.
much as it's Greenway, I truly think that it really is Lake Minnetonka. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think
that
it's
too.
the amount of money that the house is. I think all of that stuff is
Yeah,
just, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, which I have respect. I can understand that as somebody. It's like, I don't know if you followed Netflix lately, but like the sheer amount of real estate shows.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's just, there's something that there was kind of a part of me that I was like, geez, I wonder if we should almost do a follow up and have like somebody from our art section go and tour the home and get like take some pictures. I mean, I'm kind of curious, what is it? Because all we have is Levinsky shots from 2021 when everything was under construction. I'm like, well,
Hmm.
let's go see this garage Mahal. Anyway, I maybe need to pitch that to somebody.
Yeah, it's not too
So
late.
yeah. So anyway, it's a wonderful time to be back here, and I appreciate you on having me on to discuss these matters.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Speaking of the very wealthy, let's talk Timberwolves for a little bit.
Okay, let's do it.
It's off season time, but Ant just won a gold medal.
Over
Rudy
Gobert.
got a silver. A lot of other guys competed, also receiving votes, kind of stuff. It was a great Olympics. First off, and kind of seeing Ant's continued ascent to kind of this national stage. It was Steph and LeBron that were really kind of taking over in the semifinal game and then the gold medal game. But he had his moments, and he's becoming like one of these young faces of the league, and that's not it's not going to win you games or lose games, but it is the league recognizing where he is, and that piece of it feels exciting because he's had a birthday in there. He's like still like 23. I think 22? He just turned 20, 22, 23. He's very young still, and now still ascending to this kind of place in the, and that's what they need. That he is the key to any higher ceiling than they have right now. Plus some of the young guys they have again too.
But I thought the fact that, I think going into the games, there was this question because when they were in the FIBA World Cup last year, he was so dominant and he had this kind of alpha status where everybody's like, I remember them talking about that coming into this year, like, is this guy? And then he carried that through during the regular season, the playoffs. And then in this, though, it's like he kind of got back into a certain part of the pecking order. It's like the legends were legendary, and Ant was more of a kind of auxiliary part of that. And I think that's actually kind of a good thing in a way, because for as good as he is, it's like when you watch those guys, especially Curry at the end of that game, I mean, that's the gold medal game. That was one of the most electrifying. And you just remember that there are levels to this. There are still levels to this. Yes. We all love Ant, and Ant is a threat. And I'm sure that this Netflix documentary is going to superstardom this guy. I mean, there's a reason that when they just announced opening night, that all of a sudden the Wolves are on opening night playing the Lakers. I would have to imagine that has never happened in the history of this franchise that they have played. Maybe the year after they went to the Western Conference Finals. I don't know.
And Christmas against the Mavericks too, I do believe.
Oh, did they announce that too?
I think that's been leaked. I don't know if that's official yet, but I think
what are we doing with this? Anyway, so there's 82 games. What are we going to? Are we piecemealing this like week by week?
Yeah, that's we can do that. That's fine.
I don't know. Am I like curmudgeon all of a sudden? So anyway, but I do think that he. You can just see there was this video that Steph Curry posted after they won, and Ant's in there, and it's like, you cannot deny that he might be the most enjoyable person that I can remember. He is so fun, and he's just so light. And it's been one of the really fun things as a fan of the Wolves to see him, not change too much. And it's like he still kind of has this youthful energy and exuberance about what he's doing that I think rubs off on some of these legendary players. I remember thinking, Steph Curry is probably one of the most what's the word I'm looking for? It's not that he is bland, but he is just very put together. And you compare kind of that with Ant, who just has a free form nature to himself. And I'm like, man, I just feel so lucky that we get to cover this guy. And I mean, I think I don't know if you've talked, but Chris Hine has a book coming out about him that I think we're all really excited about. And what happens next with this season, I have no idea. I know that we got Joe Engels. I mean, I've been kind of secluded in my own world over here, but I remember seeing that and thinking that's the kind of signing that I personally love because I've always hated him. And because he's just a killer, he's a great 3-point shooter.
Right.
And I don't know. I think Ant, to me, like you said, the next level for this team is going to come with him. And the only level really for them to get to that is higher is the NBA Finals. So all those burdens of expectations, the national TV, all of that stuff is going to come just hammering the Wolves in a big way this season. And we'll see how they do. I'll be curious to see what the media treatment is like. And but it sure seems like the NBA has a vested interest in his promotion, right? I don't think we're wrong about that.
And I don't think we've talked since the draft, but they crushed the draft. They crushed it.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to that thing of why do you trade for Rudy Gobert? Why do you dump the picks? I mean, I think it's because if you're a smart GM or whatever the name, president of basketball operations, it's like you can maybe still find ways to maneuver in these spaces. And if you have a solid 6-man, I mean, I feel like they have their top 6 or 7 pretty locked in. And so you can try to do things because you don't have to worry quite as much about your depth, knock wood, we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. I think that if you were to ask me right now, the Twins are playing, I still can't watch the Twins on Comcast. I know you've reported about this extensively because even though I used to have Bally Sports and now the Twins are back on Comcast, I have to pay some extra amount of money or figure something out to get it. But nonetheless, for me, I still am thinking that this Wolves season will remain probably the highlight of Minnesota sports coming up here for the next year. I just think the excitement over that hasn't dwindled that much.
No, they are the best, the best run franchise right now. I know PWHL Minnesota just won a title. I don't know if they're the best.
They fired their GM. They fired their GM. Yeah.
I don't know if they're the best run franchise. They're the most. They have the claim for most recent pinnacle of success. But
you can't be best run and fire the head of the organization.
And for as good as they were, that's still a different level than the NBA in terms of just relative interest nationwide. It just is. So the Wolves, it's such an about face for what we're used to, though. Like they were a laughing stock for so long. Like you look at their history and it's all these like 55, 60, 65 lost seasons and like no hope to go from there to where they are right now. It's almost just mystifying how it all came together.
When do you start to believe that it's really real? I mean, how many years do you have to stack up when you say, okay, this franchise has actually turned? Because remember, we are not that far removed from the Rudy Gobert trade being generally considered a disaster, from all of these questions lingering about if he and Towns could play together. Right. And you have a great season, and all of a sudden a lot of those questions are quieted. But you know what I mean? I think in modern sports, the movement, player movement, the discontent that can arise, it's where I start to wonder, how do you build a lasting thing? And you hope that maybe Towns being Towns and his, I think he really has fit into the role that he's performing really well here. You've got guys like Conley and Gobert who seem to just go about their business and do the work. And then you have Ant, who literally feels like the most charismatic player in the league right now. Okay, so maybe you have a formula here. But as a fan of just modern sports, I kind of wonder, well, what is our length that we look for to consider a team to really have turned a corner, or a franchise to have really turned a corner? And is it a year? Is it 2 years? What's the window? I mean, truly, I think most windows in pro sports now exist within 2-3 years. And after that, everything is a question mark. So I'll be very curious to see, is Ant like Tim Duncan? Is he like Kevin Garnett, for that matter? Is he like some of these people who single-handedly could sort of change the direction and feelings of a franchise? My feeling would be that he is, but there's a long way to go before we know that. The dude's just 23 years old.
Yeah, and it's, like we said, it's a matter of, can you do it again? I think you got it if it happens again next year, and that's not to say they have to go just as far. It's just like, are they in that mix again? Are they a 55 to 60 win team? They could have easily lost to Denver in a great playoff series. We'd think a little bit differently of them right now, but we'd still be saying, okay, this is a team that's kind of got it. So it doesn't have to be this kind of linear progression, but it does have to be, you can't go too far back. And the thing though is like two things. One, like they they have made the playoffs 3 years in a row now, right? Like, so even the disaster year of Gobert, they made the playoffs. They lost in 5. The year before that, they had that really good playoff series against Memphis. So they were kind of like building at least a little bit. It wasn't like it was back to square one. And then this past year was kind of the leap forward. But if you look back at like any kind of recent Minnesota sports history, like Minnesota teams, for whatever reason, have had a hard time kind of building on that momentum. You get the Vikings who like get these runs to the NFC title game, then the next year they don't make the playoffs. And you get the Twins kind of bouncing all around like that. You get the Wild, up and down, up and down. So it will be this is the key year in terms of like, is this thing a sustainable model of success? And I think it is too. I think it is because of Ant, because of who they have right now, and because of the influx they have of some young talent too that can maybe offset some of the inevitable departures because they can't pay everybody at a certain point.
And they also do have that stability. A lot of these guys are signed for such a long term that it's like, okay, we can roll this for at least 2-3 years where everybody's under contract for the most part. And it is a whole other world, isn't it? It's just one of those things where last year felt like lightning in a bottle, but when you do kind of wide angle lens at it, you do see that, hey, they have been inching towards us ever since they drafted him. And it is incredible. It shows how long it can take for that moment to happen. And, that they retained Conley. There was all that worry too. Like, are they going to lose him this offseason? I think that was, right at the end of the year, that was a very big question. We're still waiting for arbitration to play out. Sounds like that'll be November.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So there's still that whole thing kind of floating out there.
Almost forgot about that for now.
Yeah.
Which is probably good for them.
I think it's a thrilling thing. I can't remember if you and I talked about this last year, if I just talked with friends of mine, but there's this weird sadness that comes with something you love that was so miserable becoming suddenly very popular. I think, it's sort of like, I'm excited for all of the attention that's going to be around this team and for everybody to be paying attention to it. I think it's a rich space, and I'm glad we have the people that we have on it and have been covering it for so long, and having a beat reporter like Chris who can just, expertly control it. But it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a little bit like the band that you used to love that made it big now. And it's not just, they're not just yours anymore. They're everybody's, and you want everybody to love them, but you want yourself to love them just a little bit more.
Yeah, you want to be the one. You want to be able to say, I had it first.
I knew it. I was on this from the jump. Jeff Day, appreciate it. Who knows what you'll be working on next that will bring you back to the show.
I will be back. I can tease you a little bit of a teaser here that I have one sports story that I've been working on for months that if I screw this up, I think they'll retroactively kick me out of sports because it is such a good story coming out of the U, and it should be in the next month or so. So
perfect.
I think I'll be back here with you, hopefully, if you'll have me.
Absolutely will. Always a pleasure to have you, Jeff Day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Great stuff from Jeff. As always, love the versatility in being able to talk about a story he reported with a lot of legal entanglements. Vikings linebacker Chad Greenway, of course, part of that story about the garage Mahal, and then jump right into Timberwolves with me. Comfortable talking about both. Not everybody would be, but Jeff, a great guest, hoping to talk to him again soon when he has that big story he's been talking about coming out. So we'll get him back on when that happens, and I'm guessing I'll engage him in some Wolves talk again then, because I just can't help myself, and neither can he. Let's finish with the cooler. A little bit more injury news. Darius Taylor, the excellent Gophers running back, suffered an apparent hamstring injury during Tuesday's practice. He was running pass routes along the sideline, reading from Star Tribune story written by Joe Christensen. Went down, had the trainers had the leg wrapped up in ice. PJ Fleck, Gophers coach, says the good thing is it's nothing serious, but Taylor did miss 5 games last year at the end of the season because of a hamstring injury, coincided with the Gophers' kind of nosedive at the end of the year. So he is obviously one of their most important players, one of their best players, one of their stars. Need to get him back healthy, and a hamstring's nothing to mess with, especially with someone who relies on cuts, speed, everything like that in his game. So hopefully for the Gophers' sake, it is truly nothing serious, because we've had enough of our serious injuries here this week with J.J. McCarthy, Joe Ryan. It sounds like the Twins maybe got some good news on Byron Buxton. His hip MRI didn't show anything bad. It's a clean MRI, so maybe he'll be back sooner rather than later. But enough bad injury news right now. They need some good injury news on Darius Taylor. That will do it for me today. Patrick Royce, expected to join me on Thursday's show. A little bit of a different programming this week because Patrick was off on Monday. We'd switched things around a little bit, had Andrew Kramer on to talk Vikings. But the beauty of this is that Patrick and I will be able to sum up the entirety of this Twins homestand. They play Kansas City tonight in the finale of that. Louie Varland, who we talked about earlier, expected to pitch tonight in that game. So Patrick and I will talk about that and all manner of other things as well. Until tomorrow, I am Michael Rand, back at it again on Thursday with Royce.